This is why I hate the Kentucky Wildcats.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today we talk about why I hate the Kentucky Wildcats and see how the Ole Miss versus Kentucky game is going to fall, even with the roster work that is left to be done. We also talk about Austin Simmons' first SEC road game, potentially against a Mark Stoops defense that traditionally does pretty well against Lane Kiffin. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to our insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Remember, a link down in the description is to our subtext program. If you're interested in helping me out during my surgery and recovery, you can sign up for that. We're not using it at the moment, but all the proceeds from that go to me. It's $5 a month. It's not much, but if everybody signs up, it will add up. I appreciate that very much. Watch as much as you can. Listen as much as you can. Check out Brian Smith like you saw yesterday. And over the next couple of weeks, he's going to be doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And the Locked On SEC hosts are going to be doing their part as well. Tomorrow morning, I will be on the operating room table. Prayers be with me. If you would give me those, that would be pretty fantastic. But for the meantime, I do want to make sure that you have some unique content. So I am going to do the Why I Hate series for all 8 SEC games that are going to air on Tuesdays during my recovery. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And don't forget the special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They offer even more perspectives on college football, the SEC, and heck, even Ole Miss. So this is why I do not I hate the Kentucky Wildcats. And a lot of people are going to look at it as like, well, here we go. We're going to talk about this fall. And honestly, that's on the list, but that's down the list. Because when it comes to the Kentucky Wildcats, the thing that drives me crazy is in the SEC, everybody gives Missouri all this hate about being a team that doesn't culturally fit in the Southeastern Conference, a team that doesn't belong with their SEC brethren, a team that just is here for the paycheck and would be better served in the Big Ten. Everybody likes to play that game with Missouri. But the reality is that has been Kentucky's identity for the entirety of their existence in the Southeastern Conference. They're a school that seemingly has not cared about football except in a couple of bursts. It is a basketball school to where if you go to Lance Dahl's Locked On Kentucky, they're doing basketball videos in September and October. That is unheard of to anybody else in the Southeastern Conference. They culturally do not fit with the rest of the SEC. No matter what happens at Kentucky, they don't fit with the rest of the SEC. Missouri is a better fit for the Southeastern Conference than Kentucky, especially now that Texas and Oklahoma has joined in. Kentucky has become that outlier again. And them caring more about basketball. Look, don't get me wrong. March Madness was fun. I had a great time. I think Chris Beard's going to be a superstar at Ole Miss. Covering basketball in September and October to me is such a completely foreign thought that I can't even understand. And let's talk about Mark Stoops. I hate Kentucky because of Mark Stoops, and not because he's a bad coach, because he has traditionally had Lane Kiffin's number. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But Mark Stoops just up and took the Texas A&M job. I mean, you make no mistake, he took the Texas A&M job. Texas A&M's alumni and boosters revolted against Ross Bjork hiring Mark Stoops as their football coach at Texas 8-4. And Mark Stoops ended up not getting the job. He just went back to Kentucky and said, I'm sorry, and acted like nothing had happened. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was different. This is a guy that literally tried to leave on you in the middle of the night, and you just took it. Why? Because he went to a Citrus Bowl? Because he had a 10-win season at Kentucky, won? Because he helped you get rid of John Calipari that you desperately wanted? We're going to talk about him a little bit in the next show. But Mark Stoops doing that made Kentucky such a submissive for putting up with what happened. Mark Stoops staying the coach of Kentucky even after he left Kentucky to take the Texas A&M job is just a weird basketball dominant move. It makes no sense in the Southeastern Conference, and I can't think of one other school in the SEC that would even think about pulling that off. And finally, I hate Kentucky because of what happened in September. Kentucky was Ole Miss and 7. That game prevented Ole Miss from making the college football playoff. I'm convinced Ole Miss had the most talented team and the best team in the entire Southeastern Conference, and they just messed it up. And part of that was to Kentucky, of all things, throwing a 4th and 12 duck and chuck to Berrien Brown down the sideline and completing that pass, to fumbling into the end zone and recovering it. Kentucky was blessed that day in a huge way, and it's going to be a major component of Ole Miss when they get up to Kroger Field in Lexington. These are 3 reasons why I hate Kentucky. They don't make sense. They don't fit in the Southeastern Conference. Mark Stoops and Kentucky have a weird relationship to where, I don't know, Kentucky's kind of a battered woman at the moment. And you have a situation to where Kentucky just had an unbelievably blessed day in Oxford, Mississippi, in a game that Ole Miss undoubtedly should have won. Why is that? Why does Mark Stoops have Lane Kiffin's number? Why is it that Mark Stoops can handle Ole Miss's offense when other great defensive coordinators like Kirby Smart seemingly cannot? Why is that something that's a thing? We'll talk about that next. We're back at Locked On Ole Miss. I'm Steven Willis. Hey, 24 hours away from surgery and getting cut up, but we're going to do these evergreen episodes for everybody so you can keep advantage of what's going on. If you're interested, if you want to help out, please join the subtext community as well. We're going to be insiders during football season. We blow that up. Right now, there's not much going on there. You're not going to receive a text message from it, but it could be viewed as a $5 contribution to that. And kind of over time that could build up. So if you're interested in joining that, the link is down in the description. Listen, Mark Stoops has had a little bit of success against Lane Kiffin. If you go back to their first matchup during the COVID year, that Matt Corral ended up winning the game on a missed extra point by Kentucky. I think the final score was like 42-41. And you look at what's going on in this Kentucky Ole Miss series, it's been very back and forth, and Mark Stoops has kind of made life difficult for Lane Kiffin. If you look at the 2024 game, to where Jackson Dart just didn't seem to have it. He had the 1 touchdown pass to Trey Harris, but as a whole, Kentucky was able to keep Ole Miss's offense under wraps, even though Kentucky was without their best cornerback. Why were they able to do that? Why? My theory on that, and I think it is just a theory, but I think it's a good theory, is Mark Stoops makes you pick the longest route. If you're going to run RPOs, the RPO is going to be for the longest way to get down the field, because eventually he is banking on the fact that you are going to shoot yourself on the foot. He's not going to give up big plays. He is going to force you to be patient and take what is given. And if you do that, you're going to beat Kentucky relatively easily, as a lot of teams did a year ago. Jackson Dart, God bless him, best quarterback potentially in the history of Ole Miss. He's definitely in the top 5, probably in the top 2. He had a propensity to play for the deep ball and to play favorites, and Kentucky took advantage of that last year. He knew that Jackson Dart wanted to throw the ball down the field. Jackson Dart had 2 games against Kentucky, played 2 games against Kentucky, I think he threw for a total of about 290 yards. Kentucky did a number on Jackson Dart. Mark Stoops owned Jackson Dart like no other defensive coordinator did. And because of that, and I think it is because of this, you look at what I talked about, not giving up big plays, not giving up explosives. You need a quarterback that is willing to take what is given, and you're okay getting 5-yard gains down the field because of the end result being a touchdown. Kentucky was not going to give up explosive plays. They were not going to let Trey Harris beat them. They were not going to be that typical sieve of a defense that just leaks explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. In fact, they are designed that if you try to do that, it is going to be at your peril. And Lane Kiffin has trouble with Mark Stoops a lot of because of this reason. The RPO game, Ole Miss famously throws third-level RPOs. And what I mean by third-level RPOs, they're making the read off of a safety. Whatever he does is what's going to be open. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But Mark Stoops played a lot of kind of sinking umbrella coverage, keeping everything in front of them, going to be in position to make plays downfield. You were not going to beat them down the field. But Jackson Dart kept trying. That's the long and the short of it. The Lane Kiffin offense kept trying. Everything kept going and playing directly into Mark Stoops' hands. And the first game with Jackson Dart and the second game with Jackson Dart under Lane Kiffin was almost carbon copies of each other. The only difference in the game is Kentucky in this one had a fourth down that they completed and fumbled in the end zone and got it and took the lead. And in the first game, Kentucky got sacked, ended up fumbling on fourth down there in a game that they were in position to win as well. Very hard-fought games between Mark Stoops and Lane Kiffin. So Mark Stoops playing the game to where he does not give up explosive plays. Whenever there's an RPO, he forces the decision to be to the longer road RPO. And he has faith in what is going to be able to happen. And he's going to make Ole Miss run the ball, potentially, and he is going to stop the run. He is going to force that read. If you look at it, we always talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny on this show. That is our good luck show. That is what we do. But in that, they have a conversation about card tricks. And she says, I force the card. I give you the illusion of a choice, but in the end, you actually pick the card that I want you to pick. That is what Mark Stoops is doing with the RPO offense for Ole Miss right now. He's forcing Ole Miss to pick the option that he wants them to pick just off of a read. And a lot of that is because of the way they sink and the way they are good at stopping the run right now, whether through big defensive linemen, good linebackers, stuff like that. But Mark Stoops right now has Lane Kiffin's number as a defense to an offense. Now, it could change. It likely will change. And I will tell you why it likely will change coming up next. Welcome back to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, third segment of the show. Listen, this is going to be Austin Simmons' road SEC debut, the second game of the season against the Kentucky Wildcats. Austin Simmons up at the big grocery bag in Kentucky. You have a game to where I'm expecting Austin to shine. What Mark Stoops did against Jackson Dart, I do not think he can do that same thing against Austin Simmons, unless over the course of spring practice and over the course of fall camp, it gets drilled into his head to play quarterback like Jackson Dart. They're two quarterbacks that play the game completely different ways. There's really no other way to put that. They play the game in completely different ways. And because of that, I think that Ole Miss is going to have an advantage in this game more so than they did with Jackson Dart. Like I said, Jackson Dart was very deep ball dominant, and he threw an excellent deep ball, and is probably going to be the reason that he makes a lot of money in the NFL draft in the coming weeks. But That is not the way to attack Kentucky's defense. That's what they want you to do in the pass game, and they want to try and force you to run the ball into a defense that is pretty good at stopping the run, traditionally. That's what Kentucky wants you to do. What they don't want you to do is use short and intermediate passes, real quick gains, and drive the ball down the field and get points, any points. Because the reality is Kentucky's offense isn't good enough to where you can turn down 3 points. A 10-7 game is a likely win for Ole Miss in this contest. A 14-13 game. You are not in a position to turn down points in this. I always talk about, and I end every show with analytics as the old English word that means bad football. And that's what I mean. Against Kentucky, you cannot turn down points. Against Kentucky this past year, they turned down points. They had a turnover in the red zone. Ole Miss beat themselves in the biggest loss potentially in their history. So Austin Simmons comes in. Why will he be different and fare different than Jackson Dart? And I think it's because of his processing ability that he has. The fact that he gets rid of the ball so quickly. A lot of the stuff that you saw against the Georgia Bulldogs, the 3-step drop, he knew exactly where he wanted to go. The ball placement was elite. The ball, the arm was strong. It was one of the stronger arms on the team. I think Austin Simmons is in a position to attack the Kentucky defense before they can get set up. If you want to look at a basketball term, the reason people want to play in transition, they don't want to go against a set defense. I think in each play, the quicker that you attack it before the defense can get backed up and set up, the better off you're going to be. And a player like Caden Lee, a player like Daquan Wright, a player like Caleb Odom, a player like Luke Haas, a player like Deshaun Stribling, that gives you different weapons on the outside and in the inside that this defense has difficulty identifying who the one is going to be. In 2024, everybody knew that Trey Harris was the guy. He was the guy you had to take away. Roll everything over, game plan for him. Trey Harris is going to be the most important thing. Jackson Dart, everybody knew that Jackson Dart liked to duck and chuck and throw the ball downfield. We complained about it during the season many times, but that doesn't mean he didn't do it. Austin Simmons taking what is given, driving the ball down the field is the path to a 300-yard passing day, a path to softening up that defense, the path to changing the way that Mark Stoops wants to play in the middle of the game. If Ole Miss can show the patience to do it. And honestly, we always talk about a team taking on the personality of its coach. That's something everybody says. A team takes on the personality of its coach. Well, in Ole Miss's case, they take on the personality of Lane Kiffin, and patience is not his virtue. That's not what he does. The going for it inside the red zone, the not willing to play the long game. The biggest difference between Lane Kiffin and, say, Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and those guys is those guys expect to win. They play as favorites completely. Lane Kiffin still has the mentality of playing as the underdog, the attitude that was built up from his time at Florida Atlantic. He brought to Ole Miss, had some success early on, but now that Ole Miss has kind of turned a corner and had 3 10-win seasons in 4 years, playing as the favorite is going to be an important thing, and that means taking points every single time. Every time. If they stop you on 3rd and 1 and it's 4th and a half yard, you're a favorite. You do not have to go for it. You might want to go for it. You might think you can make it, which you might do it, but you don't have to go for it because your team is traditionally good enough to be able to play the field position and the point game and all of the stuff that Nick Saban's and Kirby Smart did. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss and what they can do as well. Pretty good stuff, in my opinion. We'll see if they can handle what's going on. But thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Remember, if you are interested in supporting the podcast financially, you can hit the join subtext link down in the description. Sign up. It's $5 per month. I get every penny of that $5 in lieu of a GoFundMe. We are doing that during this operation as I'm having brain surgery tomorrow. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Fantastic stuff. Check out Locked On SEC. And of course, Brian Smith is here on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to give you all the relevant recruiting news. Check that out as well. Watch every YouTube video. Subscribe. Listen to every podcast. All of that stuff helps me out. And also evangelize to your friends as well and get them in the Locked On Ole Miss train as well. So hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.